So if the many worlds theory is true, you can't travel to other worlds because they don't actually take up a separate location. They are layered quantum states on top of you. In which case, could you actually see into these other worlds? And the interesting thing is that this is one of the hot debates when it comes to many worlds theory versus the Copenhagen interpretation or other interpretations of quantum mechanics. Because many physicists will say that the many worlds interpretation is kind of just like science religion. Like, there's lots of evidence for it, but because, by definition, we cannot interact with these other worlds, basically we're just talking about something that has no bearing in our universe whatsoever. Like, it's a non-thing. Sabine Hossenfelter actually did a notorious YouTube video where she said that the many worlds interpretation is essentially religion and not science. Supporters of the many world interpretation, however, say A, there's evidence for it, and B, it is not strictly true that we cannot quote-unquote interact with these other quantum states. We cannot physically interact with them, but if the universe is in fact causal, then we could, hypothetically, take a quantum event, understand all the possible quantum resolutions it could have, know what resolution it had in our world, and trace its causal chain, and then, hypothetically, trace the causal chain of what would have happened if it resolved in a different way, essentially allowing us to use a predictive model to peer into another quantum world. Now, this is just for particle-by-particle interactions. The technology needed to, look into a whole other quantum universe is so many magnitudes above what we have now, and might actually be impossible. But still, that is some knowledge about this other quantum world that we have deduced. Sure, we haven't directly observed it, but there are lots of things in science that we don't directly observe and instead deduce. And that, I guess, is the big debate. Could the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics be useful in any way? Because if it is useful, it has a place in science. But if it's not useful, then it's not really worth thinking about. And even if it is true, then we can just treat it like the Copenhagen interpretation because that's the only thing that's going to be useful to us. And science is really only interested in what's useful. And right now, the debate on whether or not the many worlds interpretation is useful or not is unresolved. So I guess this is a very long-winded way of saying we don't know. Supporters of the many worlds interpretation would say yes, and opponents would say no.